So I would like to welcome everybody to the 2020 DFW Solar Tour. My name is James Ornstein, and I'm involved with North Texas Renewable Energy Group, and I'm going to be moderating this session. If I can figure out how to see the chat, which doesn't seem to be working. I would like to thank our Terawatt sponsor, Dallas College. I thank our homeowner, Paul Westbrook, for welcoming us into his residence, and also his wife, who's hanging on there also, Elena. And thank you everybody in NT Reg for putting on this event. This is the 11th year of the DFW Solar Tour. And thank everybody who's attending. As far as etiquette goes for the Zoom session, it's scheduled for 30 minutes. We can continue up to another 20 minutes over before we run into the next people that need to use the room. And then please mute your mic if you're not speaking so we don't pick up background noise. The meeting is being recorded, so if you object to that, please let us know and then we can hash that out. And to ask a question, please unmute your mic or input your question into the chat box. And with that, I will turn it over to Paul.
All right, James, thanks. Looks like we have two people, Susan and Tiffany, who are visitors. So if you guys want to unmute and talk, that's fine. If you want to chat, that's fine. We usually do these tours in person, have about a 45-minute loop. I cover passive solar, solar water heating, ground source heat pumps, solar electric systems, all those things. So if there's a particular topic or area of interest, let me know and I can focus on that a bit. If nothing pops up or nobody pops in a minute, I will probably just start showing some stuff and maybe that'll spark some discussion. So I'm going to share my screen here. And solar electric is obviously the predominant thing that people think about with solar, so I will start with that. I'll back up a little bit, I guess. Actually, let me back up and talk about the passive features of the house just a little bit. So here's a wireframe diagram of our house. We built in 1996, so 24 years ago last month we moved in. And we designed the house to be as energy efficient as possible. We wanted to minimize use. Solar electric was still way too expensive in the 90s to consider putting it on. So we went with what's called passive solar, and that tries to minimize the use of electricity. So a few strategies that we used. You can see it's a two-story house with a stacked footprint so that we have a minimal amount of surface area for the volume that we have in the house. This is the south face and most of the windows are on the south. And they all have overhangs that are sized specifically to shade them when the high summer sun is out, but provide plenty of daylight and warmth into the windows in the winter. We use what's called structural insulated panels, which is a very thorough insulation system that makes a very airtight envelope. So we sealed out air leaks and we have consistent insulation. We even insulated the slab, the concrete slab. It radiates and loses a lot of heat in the winter out to the cold air on that little rim you can see around the base of the house. So we did all of those things on the passive side. And that was to significantly reduce the amount of energy that we use. And then in 2012, we finally, prices got low enough that we put solar electric on the house. And this is an aerial view. You can see one of the other passive strategies we have is I'm nestled in the woods right here. And on the east side and the west side, we have huge trees which shade our house beautifully most of the morning and most of the afternoon. So we really just have direct sun exposure in the peak of the day. And this is a little model. We have 14 solar electric panels on the roof here. And out here in the field from 2006 through 2013, we had a 30-foot wind turbine, but I have too many trees, which was really hampering the turbine. So we popped a couple extra solar panels out there after I sold the turbine to someone who didn't have any trees. And so that's the system. And I can just click to the graph tab here. And it will show you, this is over the lifetime since December of 2012. You can see summer and winter as we get more and less sun, the diurnal annual swings of how much energy we produce. But we've produced over 38 megawatt hours of electricity over the last almost 8 years. So that's a quick tour of solar electric. Oh, I see 2 more people. Let me get them in. One's you, James. But... Hi, Bill, and welcome. We just have a small crowd on, so if you want to unmute and ask questions at any time or use the chat box, please feel free. We're freewheeling to see what people are interested in, what they want to learn about. So I'll go back to a couple slides here and just give you a little more on the passive solar side. So this little diagram is really, you probably noticed this, but haven't noticed this very often. But in the winter, the sun actually rises quite a bit south of east and obviously stays low in the sky. In Dallas-Fort Worth, it only gets to 33 degrees above the horizon. And then it sets fairly south of west as well. Now in the summer, it actually rises to the north of east, climbs quickly high in the sky, almost directly overhead, 81 degrees, and then swings around and sets to the north. So you can see that on the south side of the house, if you just size this overhang properly, the high summer sun is blocked from the windows. You get the daylight, which you want, but you don't get the heat gain. And in the winter, the low sun easily comes under the overhang and you get nice heat coming into the home for free. So it's called passive because once you design it and install it, there's no maintenance, there's no operation, there's no electricity to run it. It just sits there passively and works for you all year round. And so by having good insulation, once the heat comes in, it stays in, or once you block it out, it stays out. So that's kind of a quick passive solar primer. Let me get back out of this real quick. Here's just to show you what a structural insulated panel looks like. It has a skin of oriented strand board on each side and a foam core of insulation. And there is no stud. There's no stud in the wall. All the sticks that you see for homes being built, those are studs. They're usually every 16 inches. And though there's insulation between them, the stud still conducts a lot of energy between them. In this system, the skin carries the entire structural load of the house and gives you uniform insulation. If anybody likes to see infrared pictures, this is kind of interesting pair. A friend of mine came over with a camera one night. It was 43 degrees outside. Up here on the top is my house, and red means that heat is leaking or that it's reflecting. And so you can see my walls are green and yellow, and there's a little bit of red up at the top, but what that is trapped heat that was rising on the outside and just kind of pooled under the overhangs. And here is my air-to-air heat exchanger. This is the exhaust coming out of the house, and it's pooling underneath here. So my walls are not leaking the heat. They're actually quite well insulated. The tire of my friend's vehicle, which had driven on the road, is very red hot in the corner there. So we walked down the street to some conventionally built houses, and it looks like they're on fire. They're leaking heat all over the place. I don't think they even insulated around this door, this entry door. It's just all red, and you can see the walls, quite a bit of heat leaking out of those as well. All right, so anybody, I'll pause for a minute. Anybody got any questions or other areas they want to look at? I've got plenty of stuff I can show, so just depends on what you're interested in. What's that? I'm curious too, we had some videos posted. Did the people on the call watch either of my videos? I could run one of those, or either of those actually.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are your windows on the south side, are they low in the room? Are they high, or do you have a combination?
Hang on, I'll get to a photograph. That's always the easiest way to show somebody. No, I've got an exterior one. Here's the one I want.
Ah, the summer and winter.
This perfectly shows passive solar. So here's the south side of our house. It's a 2-story house. So you can see that we have roughly 4 foot by 6 foot windows. And you can't quite see the clerestory, but in this one, but that little clerestory strip at the top had some about 1.5 foot high windows. And that's for natural daylighting coming into the house. But this shows you the great, this lower right photo is high noon, solar noon in summer. And you can see this overhang is shading really the entire face of the house. There's the sun line right there. So we're getting views, we're getting daylight, but we're not getting gain. Now this is an old school photograph. I need to take a digital one, but you can see that in the equinox in the late September and late March, when the transition is happening, the shade line is right about at the bottom of the windows. And then here in the winter, you can see the shade line is all the way up at almost the top of the windows. So they're bathed in light. And while we're on this, these 2 panels are up here, are my solar water heating panels that are up on the roof. We can talk about solar water heating too.
How much overhang is it?
So there's a formula that you use to calculate it. Let me see if I put that in here.
So what you're doing is one overhang at the top for both the first and second story windows.
Actually, the second story, on the ground floor, the first floor, there's a trellis. And I used to take some screen material and just screw it to the top of the trellis as a little shade screen. But we found that over time, because we're a fairly wooded site, that change happens so dramatically that in the summer, that high overhang is shading the entire window. So I could put the screens on there, but for the first floor, but it really does a minimal amount of shading, just transition season.
Yeah, I saw the trellis. So the overhang at the top is handling both stories. I understand.
It basically is, yeah. You can see the screens are actually on. This photo was so old that the screens were on before a possum got up there and my cat got up there and broke through them one year.
Oh boy. Yeah, the critters will cause grief.
Yeah, you can. There's a screen screwed down on here, and so you can see there's a shade box here and a shade box here. But really, it happens so fast that by summertime, this high overhang is really shading the entire south face. And there's a formula. There's a formula for that. I don't know that I put it in here. But really, you just take your latitude.
Geometry.
Yeah, it's geometry.
Yeah, it's just simple geometry.
Trigonometry, I should say.
Yeah, trig. So if you take at the bottom of the window to the edge of the overhang and you draw a triangle, the angle here should be your latitude, roughly 33 degrees for Dallas-Fort Worth, if you want the transition to occur at the equinoxes, which for our weather is about the time you want that to happen. So you just do a 33-degree angle, and whatever the height is up here over to your overhang, that'll allow you to use the tangent and calculate the distance out. I think for ours, it's about 3.3 feet is the distance on that overhang.
Okay. It's further than it looked in the picture. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, it actually isn't that far. It's a few feet, which is more than a lot of homes typically do, but wasn't
About a meter.
Yeah, about a meter. There you go. We'll even go metric here. Getting pretty fancy.
The length of the arm of a king of England or something.
Yeah, there you go. Let me see if I can find any other good slides that we had a wind turbine. Here's a photo of that wind turbine, 30-foot tower. It was fun, the kinetic lawn sculpture, but it was so hampered by, having trees just too close that it really affected its ability to stay up to speed. It would pulse and it would hunt for the wind as the eddy currents came off. So we sold it to a guy who had never seen a tree before. Here's a little shot of the solar electric panels after I put them up on the roof. They're mounted up. We have the galvanized metal roof, which actually we did at the start, and that made it so much easier to install solar when we decided to do so, because there's a little clamp called an S5, S is in Sam -5, and the standing seam metal roof has these ribs, and that clamp just slides down over it, and there's a set screw on the side that bites and holds that ridge, and then you mount your rail to this clamp. So I have 0 roof penetrations. All of these rails were done by clamping to the seams, and then my microinverters are attached to the rails, and then as you saw from the other photo, the panels are then attached to the rails.
Do you remember what brand of raised seam roofing you're using?
No, I do not. It was just a standing seam metal roof. We got a couple of bids from contractors, and I mean, it's Galvalume, which is, most of them are galvanized with zinc to prevent corrosion. Galvalume also puts a small amount of aluminum in there as well for further corrosion inhibitor. And the roof is 24 years old and still going strong. It's probably going to outlive me. It's class 4 hail resistant, which means we get about a 20 to 25% discount on our homeowner's insurance because it's a hail resistant roof. So it actually, when I paid for the more expensive metal roof, I knew it would reflect the heat and it would pay for itself over a long time in energy savings, but it ended up paying for itself in a quick time with insurance savings.
Do they give you any discount because of fire?
I don't know. Not really a big high fire hazard area, so I'm not sure if that plays into the insurance company's calcs or not, but
Is it painted or is that just a natural?
It's the natural
Galvalume?
patina. Yeah, we just got the bare Galvalume and let it, kind of patina over time. The white coating would have been even more reflective, but when I got it, I thought, the coating is going to be the weak spot probably. At some point that would be the weak thing, where the bare Galvalume, it's gonna do fine.
There's a lot of work that's been done improving the coatings so that they reflect a lot of visual light and also emit a lot of infrared to cool them off at night.
Yeah, you're
Depends on
right.
yeah.
In 24 years, there's a lot of improvement. If I were doing a new one today, I would definitely look at the coating because it has some advantages. So let me show you this one. This is kind of my ta-da results, but of all the efficiency things we did, one of the measurements you can use for the efficiency of a building, and this is used often in commercial buildings and some in residential, is kBTU per square foot per year. That's the axis over here. Basically converting your kilowatt hours into BTU, any gas heat into BTU. You take all that energy, divide by the square foot over a year, and for a typical Texas home, the average is about 41.5 kBTU per square foot per year. Our home last year was 7. That's the amount of energy we needed from the grid, not yet counting our renewable production. So in efficiency alone, we got rid of almost, 75%, basically 80% of the energy through efficiency. And then my renewable energy system produced the equivalent of 5.8 of that 7. So we could add a little bit more and be a net zero home quite easily We didn't size the system up because of our utility policy, which is a piece I will definitely talk about here in a second before we lose track. But, you know, our house, this is a typical Texas house. You got heating and cooling, water heating, add for big pieces of the pie, then everything else. Our energy for heating and cooling, because of our efficiency and our efficient system, is very, very small. Let me go over to talk about the sizing of the system. And so when we got ready to do solar electric, I'm in Grayson Collin Electric Co-op, and they had a policy that they wouldn't credit us or carry over any excess energy per month. So I took, this is a chart that shows a typical North Texas home's kilowatt hours per month. You can see rising in the summer, falling in the spring and fall, up a little in the winter. And then the red was my own data from the prior few years before we put up the solar electric. So my goal was to size the system so that during the spring and fall, it would just about produce exactly what I needed each month. And then yes, I would, you know, have to buy a little more energy in the summer and winter. But if I oversized my system, I would spend my capital money to put in PV panels, and I would give away that energy with no compensation to the utility. So I'd basically become a power plant for them that I paid for, and they're using the electrons. So that's how we size the system. And that's why it only covers, you know, 75, 80% of our annual use. Now, let me talk about the cost of the system. I didn't talk about that in the first session. So the total cost of my system, remember it's small because my house is efficient, was about $7,500, which was just over $2 per watt before any rebates or credits. And I did the installation myself, so that kept the cost down even back in 2012. My net cost after the tax credit was $52.47, so about $1.40 a watt. Now, if you look at the 25-year-ish life of that, it basically is producing electricity over 25 years at about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. My utility charges 11. So people talk about payback, and if you look at just a simple payback, it's, you know, close to 9 years probably. You can see my savings so far is $4,300. I'm not quite to my $5,200 after almost 8 years. So 10, you know, roughly 10 years of payback. But what I did is look at the return on investment. If you look at that, it's like an 8% return over 25 years. And that's pretty much guaranteed. So you could put money in the stock market and hope you got 8% and take a wild ride. But I put some money into this solar system, and I basically am getting a nice guaranteed 8% return on that investment for a quarter of a century. Now, here's the change that happened. In January of this year, my utility said, we're gonna allow you to carry over any excess production going forward. So I thought, yay, I might have been upsized my system. And then a few months later, they offered rate plans, which they'd never done before. You had one rate, you paid that, that was it, roughly 11 cents a kilowatt hour, all day, all night. They went to a free nights and weekends plan. And on here, you can see the 2 months, or the last 2 months where I switched to that plan. We've actually been producing in the hottest 2 months of the year, we were net positive during the day when they charged 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So they're basically crediting me at that. And nights and weekends is where we used all our energy, but it cost me $0. So we basically paid the $23 plus tax base fee for the 2 hottest months of the year. And we could really crank the thermostat if we wanted to on nights and weekends because it cost me nothing. I don't want to waste energy, so we didn't go wild, but it's a beautifully meshed plan with our solar array. So I see Elena's been over here tight chatting away. Let's see, let me check the questions.
We got the hail question.
Yeah, for solar panels, they have to be shot at a 1-inch steel ball shot at 52 miles an hour or something like that. They have to be able to take that and not break. So it's possible that a super grapefruit size hail would break a panel. Ours are insured. They're actually basically protecting our roof as well. So they're insured just like the roof would be if they're damaged by a hailstorm. But our solar water heating panels have been in operation on our house and a previous one since 1978, and they're still fine. Our solar electric panels have gone for almost 8 years. We've gotten some, probably a couple of golf ball size hailstorms over the years, but nothing bigger than that. So just pinged right off.
I have a question. I have
Go
a
ahead.
question about the free nights and weekends.
Yeah.
I've always wondered on those plans, let's say you had a lot of battery storage. Could you simply not worry about charging the batteries in the day and charge them at night and charge them on the weekends and not have to get very much solar production because you can get free charging of your batteries at night and on the weekends?
Absolutely, you can.
Do they have any limits? In other words, could you draw your maximum service entrance a limit on the night and weekend? Could you draw, 50 amps or whatever?
Yeah, I until a lot of people start doing it and the utilities catch on, early adopters can go do that right now. You could go get a couple power walls. You could charge up at night. In fact, the power wall has program capability. You can tell it, here's my rate plan, and it will actually just sit there and do that for you. It will make sure it's maximized before 6 a.m. And then if you need some during the day, you can draw from it instead of paying for your higher dollar, your higher rate energy if your solar is not covering. So yeah, you could absolutely kind of, I don't want to say game, but you can game the system to your advantage with a battery.
Is your electricity coming at all from wind, or is it all coming from natural gas and other
So
fossil?
the power mix of Grayson Collin Electric, they actually partner with 3 other co-ops and buy power aggregately. The Denison Dam is a hydroelectric plant that's part of their mix. They have some natural gas and probably a little bit of coal. They've been getting out of coal, I know, and they've been picking up more and more wind, including they signed a contract with an offshore wind for which does better in the daytime, the peak daytime. They're getting some offshore wind, and they have 2 solar PV farms, one in Fannin and one in, I can't remember which other county, but it's just north of us. 2 PV farms under construction going online either late this year or early next year, and they have a 3rd one that just contracted. So they are actually beginning to green their power mix up as well. So, and in fact, their CFO told me that at night, often they're almost 100% wind because there's so much wind on the grid at night that's the cheap power, and that's what they purchase. So
That's what I was thinking. Their free nights is if they have a lot of wind, they've got excess production in some case from wind at night. It's producing more than anybody can use. And because nobody's, running their air conditioner in the middle of the night in the summer typically, then they don't mind if you charge up your power walls at night. It's not costing them anything, really.
exactly. Yeah, we've set, Elena's got a plug-in electric vehicle, plug-in Prius. And, after we switch to this free nights and weekends, she just set it up where it'll only kick on after 10 o'clock at night and charge. And it easily charges before 6 a.m., even if she's completely drained. So we just charge the EV at night. So she's been basically, running on free power since we made this switch.
It's amazing.
All right. We're at 2:32. We can go late. Nobody has this. We don't have to get off and open to the next one for a little bit. So I'm happy to stay on and keep answering questions and anything else.
Yeah, show us more photographs. Do you have any photographs of it?
I don't have a whole. Here's
got-
the inside of the house.
Yeah,
Of
exactly.
our nature.
Question about the cost of the panels.
So this is inside of the house. you can't quite see, but the side view shows you the clerestory windows. We don't have an attic. So our living spaces are all up on the second floor where we have the high ceilings with the great natural daylighting coming in from our clerestory windows, which gives us a real even lighting. And these were taken in, we have red oak trees, 2 acres of native forest around us. And so this was during the fall when we got the beautiful leaves. We live kind of in a treehouse here, and the bedrooms are all on the ground floor. And we get bobcats and hawks and coyotes and possums and raccoons and skunks, and all the wildlife loves it around here as well.
Okay, question about the cost of solar panels and resources for finding them.
So yeah, solar panel cost. They've continued to come down. Let me switch over. I'm doing a solar presentation for Dallas College on Tuesday. And this is my presentation. You're kind of getting a sneak preview. So I have friends all the time who get quotes, and so I've kind of been keeping track of those. And lately, the best price I've seen is about, before any rebates, before any tax credit, has been about $2.70 per watt. And in my presentation on Tuesday, I'll spend a lot more time going through how do you know how many watts you need and size of the panel. But if you had a 5 kilowatt system, and they give you a price of $13,500, you divide by 5, and you get $2.70 per watt. So that is the quoted cost. Now, you might have utility incentives in your area. Encore usually has them every year. Grayson Collin has none. The federal tax credit for 2020 fell from 30% to 26%. Next year it falls to 22%, and then it kind of disappears unless they renew it. But you would get a tax credit of $3,500 on that system if you put it in this year. And that brings that net cost right down to about $2 per watt. So just a hair under $10,000. If you do the equivalent cost of 25 years, you're basically producing power at 5.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And here is that tax credit. It was 30% for many years. It dropped to 26% this year, goes to 22, and then commercial stays 10% right now. Hopefully Congress will look at that, but who in the heck knows what's going on in anything these days anymore.
I'm building it. I'm working on the house design now, but unfortunately I won't be able to install the PV until next year. So I'm going to try to get some of that tax credit before it goes away.
Yeah, good plan. One thing too is how do you pay for it? And this is a really personal decision, but I want to let you know the options. We chose to pay for it with our cash. We said, this is better than putting it in the stock market. So we're going to take some money and pay for the system. And that's the cleanest way. You could obviously take out a loan if you could get a good rate. A lot of the panel companies will do leasing options. You really have to be careful. There are even power purchase agreements, but financing and leasing companies are like anybody else. They want to make some money as well. So you really have to read the fine print. Obviously, if you can do it, buying the system with your money is going to be the cleanest, simplest. You're going to reap all the savings that way. But there are other ways to do it as well if you can't do that. And then payback. I put this in here because we've said this so many times. People have, what's the payback? What's the payback? So here's a quiz. What's the payback of these? Crown molding on your house, if you put the fancy molding up there. How about a nice fancy outfit? Solar PV, a big SUV, stainless steel high-end appliances, buying your fancy coffee at a store, at a shop. The only one anyone ever asks about payback is solar PV, and it is the only one of those that actually has payback. So, I figured we're getting about an 8% return on our investment. There's no 8% return on anything else in these photos, yet people get really hung up on the payback. you could just do PV because you wanted to and it was the right thing to do, but it actually does have payback. So
You're talking about the different ways you could finance it. I have a friend, a previous person I worked with in the Denver area, and he has a solar panels on his house. It cost him zero. He doesn't own anything. So they come and install them. They get all the solar credits, the company that owns them. And he has an electric bill, which is nearly zero. And so he's not doing anything, providing a place for them to put their energy generation panels. That's all he's doing. And everything else is taken care of. In Denver, it's a little different. You know, Mile High, there's sun nearly every day, really high, you know, solar insolation. So it's a little different than here, but the payback thing is really interesting in different locations.
yeah,
If you had a lot of
you know,
trees,
again,
it'd be difficult.
the devil's in the details. If you get it, if you can find a deal like that and you scrutinize it and understand that you're making out okay, you know, it's not any extra out of your pocket and they benefit and you benefit, then there's the classic win-win. I'm just really, I always tell people I don't like to recommend any company because unless I've used them myself and I know them, you know, personally, I don't want to recommend somebody, but I always tell anybody, go out and get several bids. And when you get those bids, send them to me. I'm happy to scrutinize them for you and tell you, here are a couple of watch out fors, you know, or tell you that this really looks like a legit good deal. But yeah, that's just always buyer beware, but there are interesting ways to finance and do this that are outside of just the straight up cash.
So me and my brother own a house in Austin. It's one we inherited, we grew up in. And Austin is part of Austin Energy, which is one of the utilities where they're in complete control. You can't do anything without going through Austin Energy. You only get electricity from them. Well, they have a solar rebate plan, and they will pay you, I think it's 9 cents. I believe it's 9.2 cents or something per kilowatt hour of rooftop solar that you generate, which is pretty good. And they pay you a rebate. So what they do is they just monitor how much you generate. And then the house uses from the grid however much it uses. And they give you a bill for all your usage, but you get a rebate based on what you generate. And it can roll over from month to month, but you never can get it back. In other words, they won't give you a check back.
Right.
And the bad part for us, since a rental house, they will not, if the renter, if the electric bill's in the name of the renter, they will not transfer it. So if the renter leaves, all the rebates vaporize. So as a landlord, this is stupid. The landlord gets paid. So I'm looking at now what maybe as a landlord getting the bill in our name, and we would just we would get the bill from the city of Austin Electric, and we would charge the tenant by their actual consumption, and then we would make money from the rebates on however much solar we put on it. It's a difficult problem to look at this financially when it's hard to predict the future and what the utilities will do in the future. They could change their rules next year, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, the nice thing is if you are able to bill your renter for their actual consumption, then they become more conscientious consumers and will probably manage their use even better than if it's just, you know, but yeah, that makes it really complex to have a rental house and solar policies and stuff.
Well, that's the reason we don't want to make it at all bills paid, because number one, I don't know what the bill is going to be.
Exactly.
I've never gotten the electric bill for that house recently, and different renters could be. We have typically 2 or 3 unrelated people living in the house. It's near the University of Texas, and so I don't know what the bill is going to be. So they
right.
Could, you know.
Yeah, that makes it complex. James, just checking, does somebody else have this number at at 3 o'clock, do we need to get off, or are we good?
I think we're good until Tracy Wallace has it at 3:30.
We'll go another few minutes if we need to,
But
then, but just to be safe in case.
I'm still not seeing some things I should, so I'm wondering if maybe they jumped on early or something. But I think we're okay as we are, so don't worry about it.
I have another question if I'm not using too much of your time.
No, Bill, I'm happy to answer.
Do you have an energy recovery ventilator? How are you doing the heat in the house? Do you have a heat pump?
Yeah, let me get to the mechanical systems here for you real quick. So we actually do have a ground source heat pump, and I'm assuming you're at least familiar with them. You know, we've got 4 shafts drilled 220 feet down in the ground, and it's a, you know, freon to water heat exchanger that does the exchange. And so it's about twice as efficient as a typical air source heat pump. You know, SEER of 14 is the minimum. Our ground source heat pump runs at about 28. So it's twice as efficient. And because the house is so efficient, we only needed the 2.5 tons of cooling and heating. So a 2,700 square foot house would normally be around 5 tons in Dallas. We only needed 2.5 tons. So it's a very small unit, runs very low energy. And then for fresh air, because the house is so airtight, we have an enthalpy wheel energy recovery ventilator. There are 2 types of ventilators. You can do sensible, which just exchanges the heat and cool, but not the moisture. Ours has a desiccant material in there. So this little schematic, here's air flowing on 2 different channels. And this white box in the middle is a wheel that's rotating in and out of the page very slowly, and it has desiccant material in there. So what happens is it's summertime, we've cooled and dried the air inside, and we're exhausting from the kitchen and bathroom, and it goes through the wheel, and because it's dry, it picks up any moisture and takes that and blows it outside. And then we'll have an air intake on the other side of the house that's bringing in the outdoor hot, humid air. It hits this desiccant wheel, which is just rotated out of the cooler airstream. It absorbs the moisture and pre-cools the air coming in before it comes to the house. And then the winters is exactly the reverse. It preheats and pre-moistens the dry outside air. So I got some data loggers and some instrumentation and ran tests about the year after we moved in. And I'm getting about 70% of total energy recovery, both sensible and latent, from using this system. And it's now 24 years old, still working great.
Do you remember what brand of energy recovery ventilator you picked?
Yes, the one that we put in was from a company called Air Exchange with a big capital X. And I know about a decade after we moved in, they quit doing residential scale units and just concentrated on commercial and industrial. But I've searched a couple times just out of curiosity, not probably within the last year or 2, but I think Venmar is a big manufacturer. It's been a while since I've looked, but there are quite a few manufacturers with various technologies.
I'd researched it a little bit. So do you know how many air exchanges you're doing per day?
So our house is really pretty tight. There's only 2 of us in here now. So I actually set this up on a timer, and it's a variable speed. So I have it running kind of in low, medium speed. And now that we switched to nights and weekends plan, I've set it up to basically run overnight and pump in a lot of fresh air and then shut down during the day. And we're going in and out the doors enough, and there's enough volume here with just 2 of us that the house doesn't get stale. So I'd have to run the calculation of what the actual air exchange is, but we're probably running about 100 CFM for 8 hours a day on the air exchange.
You know, with coronavirus, there's a lot more interest in air exchanges in rooms and things.
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be a lot more interest in energy recovery ventilators because you're going to be able to get clean air with the right humidity without having to just open up windows and let all the humidity in.
Yeah.
And in some places, the dust also, or the smoke from the fires. My brother lives in California, and you can imagine what's happening over there right now.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you the other side benefit of this is you mentioned, when you have a leaky house, you get fresh air through cracks and crevices. Well, what also comes in through cracks and crevices is dust, dirt, and bugs. And because our house is so well sealed, this air comes through 2 filters before it comes in the house. So this house has been the least dusty home I've ever lived in by a long shot, because it's basically filtering all of the fresh air instead of it just leaking in randomly and bringing in some dust and dirt with it.
It's also bringing in fresh air to shove out any radon that happens to come up through the foundation in certain locations.
Yeah, that's not a problem for us here, but you're exactly right. In areas where there's high granite rock and such under the ground, you definitely would want one of these to help mitigate the radon that's coming up through the slab. All right, anything else, anybody? I missed doing the tours in person. It was a beautiful day, but this was worked out, I guess, as well as we could. We've come out okay, I guess, on doing them online and doing the videos that people could watch anytime. So that's good.
Is your PowerPoint going to be available for NT Reg members?
Actually, it's on my website.
Okay.
Well, let's see. I'll put the. So this one is on my website. The one that. Let me go to my web real quick. So enerjazz.com/house. I've got this temporary banner at the top about the solar tour. And right here, the Westbrook House presentation, that PDF file is the one I was showing things from. And then this Tuesday, I'm going to teach Introduction to Solar Electricity, free WebEx, Sustainable U of Dallas College. You can register there. After that presentation is over, I will post the PDF of that solar electricity file up here as well. So, and if you go to my website, there's a systems page, all the things we were talking about: ground source heat pump, energy recovery ventilator. There's the solar water heating diagram, solar electric. There's my old wind turbine, even still archived up there. I've got all my utility data. If anybody wants to go look at that, it's
okay,
all.
so you're not doing hot water from your heat pump. You're doing it from.
We have solar.
Rooftop panels,
Yeah, we have solar hot water, and my ground source heat pump is tied in as well, so it's kind of the backup. Most of the time, the sun takes care of. Let me go back to systems. Most of the time, our solar water heating gives us more than enough hot water, but it's also connected that if it's not hot enough and the heat pump is running, it will put the waste heat into the hot water storage as well. So we have a lot of hot water sources here. We're always in hot water, I guess it's what you could say.
Well, I'm working on a house, Tony Robinson with Access Design.
Oh yeah, I know Tony very well.
Right. So he's designing my house, and so I'm trying to keep up on all these things so that, I can understand it when it gets installed.
Yeah, feel free to dig around on my webpage and see if you can pick up a few more nuggets of knowledge there.
Well, I'd love to do a ground source heat pump. We haven't done a core sample yet to see what the ground's like, but hopefully it'll be good for it.
Oh yeah, it's all good around here. They drill those shafts down and slide that tubing right down in there, and it works very well. So, well, good luck on house building. That's exciting.
Thank you.
It's been a quarter century since I was in that mode now, but I still remember it. It was exciting times to be pushing the envelope on everything.